Hey there, this is Natalie, and welcome to my brand new channel where we're going to be looking at some of the most interesting stories from Reddit, including relationship stories, Am I the Butthole stories, and other popular subreddits. If you've come here from my anime channel, then please give this new content a try. I want to go for a relaxing lo-fi kind of feel that you can just chill out to while we hear about and react to some other people's crazy lives. If you just found this video because you like Reddit story videos, then please consider gently caressing the subscribe button for regular uploads, and I promise, no AI voices ever. Just me doing my best impression of a late night radio host. So let's get started. So here's a fairly funny story, though it probably wasn't that amusing for the OP at the time. This was originally posted by user Turtle Tragedy to r/TIFU, which, if you don't know, means Today I Effed Up. And it's titled, Today I Effed Up, Reading a Manuscript My Ex-Girlfriend Wrote. And he says, a few days ago, I, 28 male, got an email from my ex-girlfriend, 25 female, with the subject line, I did it thanks to you. The email had an attachment. The attachment was a manuscript. The manuscript was an autobiography written by my ex-girlfriend. The title of the autobiography instantly took me back to the time when my ex-girlfriend and I were still dating. I was sexually inexperienced back in those days, whereas my girlfriend had more than enough experience. We enjoyed talking about our past relationships and what the sex was like. It was never a thing in our relationship, just casual conversation. My ex-girlfriend had more stories to tell, and all of them were entertaining. I remember joking about how she should someday write a book. We laughed, made love, and a few months later, our relationship came to an end. It was sad, but alas, life continued. We're now back in the present. I finished reading the manuscript an hour ago. There were 72 chapters. Each chapter was about an individual person my ex-girlfriend had known sexually. No real names were mentioned, only character labels, like the surfer, the biker, the jock, the older man, etc. Some of the stories and characters I actually remembered based on the details my ex-girlfriend shared with me during our relationship. Others were totally new. But new or not, it was fun to read. Until I made it to chapter 39. My chapter. The Turtle. Keep in mind, all the sexual partners my ex-girlfriend mentioned in her manuscript had something specific about them that made the segs memorable for her. For example, the surfer always smelled like the ocean, which never failed to turn her on. The biker had gang tattoos from the neck down, but the one tattoo that always made her rip his clothes off was his pet hamster tattoo. Then there was me, a guy who couldn't swim, let alone surf, no tattoos, and with practically zero experience at the time. What was so memorable about me? Well, according to my chapter, the answer was my adorably small penis. My ex-girlfriend described how she'd almost forgotten what it felt like not to choke during oral before she met me. She compared my penis to the head of a baby turtle, thus my chapter and character name. Based on what I was reading, not only did I have the smallest penis compared to all the other people she's dated, but I also had the only one that somehow managed to look too innocent for intimacy. It didn't come across as if my ex-girlfriend was purposefully trying to insult me, but come on, I think most people can understand what a sensitive topic's size can be to a guy who's not hung like a horse. I still need to contact my ex-girlfriend and provide my feedback, but I'm gonna need some time to process what I read. It's not every day someone writes a book about your small manhood. Welcome back, insecurities. I didn't think I would still have them at this age. Yikes. I mean, I can see why she wanted to write the book, even if it does sound a bit like Dennis Reynolds' sexual memoir. And OP does say in replies in the comments that the book is actually pretty good. It's just gotta be a bit of a thing to receive something like that in your email. It seems like if she published it under a pen name, The fact she'd, given all of these men different characters and not used real names or specifics that would allow them to be identified. She could easily have published it without any of them ever finding out, or being, hurt by what she actually wrote about them. But actually sending it to him for feedback, knowing that his chapter was in there and it wasn't one of the more flattering ones, at least from a male perspective. She could have been a lot more considerate and asked for feedback from literally anybody else. Still, there is actually an update to this one, from 7 months later, where OP says, "Since my original post, I've become friends with one of the other guys my ex-girlfriend wrote about in her manuscript. He saw my post on Reddit and sent me a message. I didn't read or respond to his message for weeks because I was struggling to keep up with all the other messages in my inbox. When I finally opened his message, I realised he introduced himself as the Virgin, which made me think of one of the chapters in the manuscript. I checked the manuscript and sure enough, there it was, The Virgin, chapter 52. The Virgin's message to me had details about my ex and her manuscript that I never shared with anyone on the internet. Based on what he shared, I was convinced he was who he said he was. As we were comparing notes, it became clear to me that he hated his chapter even more than I hated mine. The Virgin, according to the manuscript, was ashamed to tell my ex-girlfriend, or our ex, that he was a virgin before the two of them eventually had cigs. But he was proud to inform her that he probably had more babies than most non-virgins because he was a regular sperm donor at the local fertility clinic. He also frequently used the suggestion box at the clinic to request that the Scooby-Doo porn parody be added to the prawn collection. He did not appreciate the fact that our ex decided to document the first time he had intimacy and add anecdotes about him that he shared with her in private. His response to my ex when he was done reading her so-called manuscript had repeated use of the B word. I knew we would be friends. We realised we have a lot more in common than the same crazy ex, and we actually live close enough to see each other from time to time. Hopefully, none of you end up reading about us in a book. TLDR, the turtle and the virgin became friends. Well, that was a nice wholesome ending to that story, I guess. It hasn't been updated yet as to whether or not the book ever got published or if she decided to publish it herself, but I don't think that OP would actually want to publicise that if it did happen. But if you ever see a book that kind of matches the description of this one, then now you know what at least two of the people featured in the stories think about the whole thing. So this story has a bit of an intriguing title. Am I the butthole for telling my mum and dad that they have to get their noses pierced if they want to see my daughter again? This was originally posted in r/am I the arsehole by user new_army_5718. And this is a fully updated story. So in the original post, OP says, "My husband and I travelled down to Mexico to visit with my family. I'm an American citizen, but my mum and dad are not. My mum and dad got my daughter earrings for her birthday. My daughter's ears are not pierced. She's only 1 year old. I told them that I'd save them for her until she was old enough to get her ears pierced. We left my daughter with her parents while we went to meet up with some friends. When we went to pick up my daughter, my mum showed us that we didn't need to wait because they'd taken her to get her ears pierced. I got my daughter and I dragged my husband out of there before he lost his shit. We went back to our hotel. I am furious. My husband said that my parents are not allowed to spend time alone with my daughter ever again. I went further. I said that I would not be bringing her or any other kids we might have down here to see my parents. We checked out 3 days early and went home. On the way, my parents were calling me to see when we were coming over. I ignored all of the calls and texts until we were back home in Phoenix. We took a couple of days to think things over and to cool down. I finally called them. I asked them not to speak until I was done talking. I told them that my husband and I are upset with them for getting our baby's ears pierced without our permission. I told them that we went back home and probably won't be visiting for a while. They said that my sister and I both had pierced ears when we were babies and that it didn't harm us. I said that we're not going to change our minds. They started getting everyone, including my grandmother, to call me and say I was being ridiculous. I talked with my husband and we came up with a compromise. We agreed that we would resume visits, but not alone time with them, if they both got their noses pierced. They said that we're being stupid and that they're not going to do that. I said no problem and hung up. We've started blocking anyone who tries to call us and give us trouble for denying my parents their right to see my daughter. I don't know if this is like a cultural thing or what, but it just seems so strange to me that you'd even want to get a baby's ears pierced. I mean, it's not like she needs to be able to coordinate her jewellery with her outfit for the Met Gala or something, is it? And, you know, with a baby there are so many things you have to already keep clean and worry about getting infected that adding things like a piercing just seems like unnecessary effort for the person taking care of the child. I don't think I got mine done till I was about 11, though that was probably a bit later than most girls because I was a bit of a wimp when it came to pain, so I was scared before that. But I just think earrings as a gift for a child that isn't even sort of school age yet is very strange. And it's just not the kind of thing you can take someone's baby and have done to them without their permission. I really don't understand why the parents don't get that they did something wrong here. But I do like the way that OP's kind of tried to teach them a lesson and show them why it was a bad decision by enforcing this kind of they both have to get their noses pierced thing, rather than just trying to argue with them without some kind of demonstration of how it made her feel. Still, there are updates to this one, so we get to see how the parents reacted. There are a few relevant comments that OP has replied to on this first post before we get to the updates though. And the first one says, "Is your daughter safe with them? Would they put her in harm's way? If not, this sounds more about you." OP says, "Depends what you mean by safe. Her ears are currently infected, so that's not great." And then she says to the same commenter, "Do I think they would harm her intentionally? No. Do I think they might do some other cultural stuff that might cause unintentional harm? Yes." Another commenter who was heavily downvoted said, "Consent at the point of a gun isn't consent." And OP replied, "No gun, no one is holding them down. They have to go and get it done themselves." The same commenter, also downvoted, says, "I completely agree with you that what they did was terrible. I'm just saying that you're basically asking for an act of contrition that is ironically similar to the thing you resent them for doing. They aren't going to learn anything or see your side. It's one thing to ask someone out of your life, it's another to conditionally allow them back in with body modification." OP says, "I think they would take time to consider any future actions with my kid very carefully." Another commenter says, "Is it worth it not to see your family?" OP says, "I'm perfectly happy to see them by Zoom." And then to another asking a similar question, she says, "I literally said that we would not be visiting for a while. I never said that we were going no contact." And then to another commenter, "Once again, just taking a break to cool down because right now I want to sue them into homelessness." Another commenter says, "How did they get a baby's ears pierced without parental consent?" And OP replies, "Not to put too fine a point on it, but there are different rules in Mexico." Another commenter who was downvoted a lot but was included in this thread because OP has some good responses to them, said, "Yes, it would be wrong to demand that your parents get their noses pierced in order to see their grandchild. Here are a few reasons why that demand is unreasonable. 1. Bodily autonomy. Your parents have the right to make decisions about their own bodies and appearances. Forcing them to modify their bodies against their will is unethical. 2. Generational differences. Body piercings are more accepted by younger generations. Your parents may have different cultural views shaped by when they grew up. 3. Grandparent-grandchild bond. Depriving a child of a relationship with loving grandparents over something superficial like a nose piercing is not in the child's best interest. 4. Ultimatums breed resentment. Using your daughter as leverage and issuing ultimatums to your parents is likely to damage your relationship with them. And 5, piercings are reversible. Your daughter will eventually grow up, and you can then decide if nose piercings align with your family's values, but she won't have grandparents forever. Instead of making demands, have an open and respectful conversation with your parents about your differing perspectives. Seek to understand each other's views. As long as they are loving and caring grandparents, focus on what really matters, allowing your child to bond with her grandparents. The nose piercing issue is relatively trivial in comparison. Yeah, and it really seems like that commenter didn't get the point of why OP made this request of her parents. It wasn't because she particularly wants them to get their noses pierced, it was because she wanted to show them things about, bodily autonomy and why somebody might have different views of how young children look with ear piercings if they're from different generations. It might be something that was cool when they were having young children, but these days people might not really approve of. Still, this is how OP responded to this commenter. She says, 1. You feel they respected my daughter's bodily autonomy? 2. Tattoos and body modification are much more common in my generation than in theirs. I imagine this trend will continue. So my daughter should be allowed to do as she wishes at whatever age she seems appropriate. 3. I literally said in my post that we would just be taking a break from visits, not cutting them off permanently. 4. They are welcome to ignore it. 5. The scarring from the infection on her ears may be permanent. Another commenter asked, why the nose? And OP replies, it was all I could think of. If I could do it over, I might go nipple, but I don't want to think about that part of my parents' anatomy. And overall, despite the mixed comments, OP was voted as not the butthole. But there is an update, and this was posted about 4 months after the original post. She says, firstly, my baby is okay. She got over the infection and the damage to her poor little ear was only cosmetic. My parents have agreed that they will pay for any reconstructive surgery that might be needed. They also both got their noses pierced. I had one of my friends down there verify it. My dad got his pierced like a bull so he can flip it inside his nose. My mom got her nostril done. Neither of them thought I was serious until we ignored them for a couple of months. No pictures, no nothing. My husband is still furious, but has agreed to accept their apologies. We also made sure that they understood that we would not be leaving our baby alone with them under any circumstances. They're going to have to go a long time to rebuild our trust. Before you ask, no, I will not force them to keep their piercings. The deal was that they did it. So it sounds like the parents did in the end kind of understand what they'd done wrong, and hopefully the baby's ear will be fine, even if she does need to have reconstructive surgery to rectify her earlobe after the infection she got from the unwanted piercing. Seems like they will still have a chance to have a relationship with their granddaughter, but they're going to be very carefully supervised, and I think that's probably the best outcome for everybody in this situation. Still, a commenter said on this post, I also wouldn't leave them alone with your husband. If people I trusted with my child potentially permanently scarred them on purpose, I'd probably have to be held back to not catch a charge. And OP replied, yeah, he's not happy still. But what do you guys think about this one? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to the channel for more chilled out Reddit story narrations and reactions in the future.